growing up? Well, I think that Danbury continues to evolve, and it evolved from when I was growing up here to the city it is now. But in some ways, there's always been some common themes, some strands that run through the city throughout the decades. I was born here at Danbury Hospital and spent my whole life here. I attended Pembroke Elementary School, Broadview Middle School. I went to Danbury High School. I served in the military. I went to Central Connecticut State University for my undergraduate degree, and then Western Connecticut State University for my master's degree, and then taught in the Danbury Public School System for 14 years. So I've seen a lot of change, evolution, but also Danbury's still a small city where everybody, kind of knows each other. There's always 6 degrees of separation between everybody, and it was the same way, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. We didn't have the technology that we have today, so it was a little bit different that way. I still remember the party phones. I was kind of conscious at the very end there when they started phasing those out, and you could pick up the phone and hear anybody in the neighborhood talking on the phone line. But I also remember having just a really great childhood in terms of caring teachers and a great school system that really cared about the students it serves. And we had always had our ups and downs, but it was a great place to be raised and to live and to be educated in. Danbury continues to be successful and thrive because we have now what we had then, which was a very diverse economy. We didn't rely on any one particular business, even though we're the hat city. By the time I was, in my teenage years, we hadn't made a hat in probably 20 years. So the town fathers were very smart at being able to diversify our income and bring other companies in and have them employ people here in the city of Danbury, and that has served us well. In terms of, things that used to happen, our summers were filled as kids with, playing baseball, sports activities. You weren't allowed to go in the house. I remember my mother used to always throw us out of the house and say, be back at 5 for dinner. We would have 72-inning softball games, and we'd just keep playing until we got tired of playing, and, then we would have capture the flag games all over the city, and all kinds of stuff like that. Ride our bikes everywhere, and you pretty much rode it to the lake. You rode it to anywhere you could find, and even down Main Street from where I lived in, which was over by the FCI. A couple highlights of the city that I remember growing up were the Danbury Fair, which was an annual fall iconic event that drew hundreds of thousands of people from all over the tri-state region. I remember the races on Saturday night, and they would draw between 10 and 12,000 people every Saturday night and pack the stands on a particularly warm summer night. And I remember being able to, you could hear those cars no matter where you were in the city. So if you weren't at the races, you could be the farthest point away and still hear them in sometimes a loudspeaker, depending on how quiet it was that night as the cars circled and circled. Sometimes you could even hear the accidents. You could hear the crowd roar, and then you could hear the conclusion of the races. So it was kind of an interesting place in that sense to live in and to be around, and something that I certainly am blessed and lucky to have experienced. I remember the blizzard of '78, and I was a newspaper boy for the Danbury News Times, and I used to deliver papers, and I had a pretty big route. In fact, my route got so big that the News Times wanted me to take on another route, and at that point it was, I learned the law of diminishing returns, because I would be out there, hustling another 30 homes and not quite making that much more money to commiserate with the more work that I had. So I cut my route down just to my neighborhood and the adjoining neighborhood. But I remember that morning waking up, and they had in February of 1978, and they had already canceled school. Nothing had happened. I mean, the ground was bare, and I went outside to the front lawn, and I remember the first big flake falling down, and it just started picking up, and then it really started going at it, and it had to be around 11 or 12 during the day. About 2:30, I went down to grab the papers to deliver them, and it was really snowing. It had been snowing probably a couple inches an hour, and the plows had been by a couple of times, and I couldn't find them. And I searched in the snowbank looking for them, and I couldn't find them because I wanted to deliver the papers. Turns out we didn't have paper delivered for the next couple of days because there was so much snow on the ground, north of 24 inches. And I didn't find that stack of papers until May, when all the snow had, May, early June, when the snow had melted. And they were still bundled in a plastic wrap, and I went out and delivered them anyways, just for fun. So it's an interesting time to grow up, and an interesting time to experience all the ups and downs, of our city. I think we saw a tremendous evolution during the 80s where, the fair closed down, the mall opened up. More emphasis was made on economic development here. Our school system began to mature. And in the 90s, kind of a similar path that we took and through the 2000s as well. But this city was always a lot of fun. And again, everybody sort of knew everybody else. We graduated my high school class with 714 people. One of the largest classes in memory, even today, by today's standards, was a huge class. But we all kind of knew each other and made it through and supported each other in that journey of, called an education.
Could you tell us about your youth with, like an instance where you're like with friends or something that is related to, like, say, like downtown Danbury, going to like a store or going to here at the Danbury Library, well, not this location, but perhaps the older location around the, down the street. Tell us maybe a story that you have a memory of that you would like to share with us today.
Well, first of all, my father was an avid reader, so every Saturday morning he would take us, myself and my sisters, down to the Danbury Public Library. I do remember going to the old library, which is farther up on Main Street. I was very young, probably 4 years old, 5 years old, so I vaguely remember the murals on the wall. And then when this library was built, we would come here religiously every Saturday, and you would pick 2 or 3 books out and take them home with you. And it was a big deal to be able to come to the library because there were no video games, there was no Netflix, it wasn't even, cable TV was in its infancy, so you had maybe 3 channels to watch and that was it. So, books were really your outlet and how you discovered a new world or lived in a new world or learned new things. And it was very popular for us to come down here. And this facility, as it is today, was just booming. Today it's, again, evolved into different things. We have the studio, we have children's programs, young adult programs, we have reading programs, language programs, computer programs, take your pick, and there's always something going on here. But back then it was straight books, and you had to check out your book with a librarian that was behind the counter, and they kind of knew you, and if you didn't return it, you would get a nasty letter in the mail to bring your book back. And it was just a great facility for all kinds of things happening. I also remember the building that was here before the library, which was the old City Hall. And on the top,
we have a postcard picture of
yeah, it was a beautiful building.
Gigantic.
Yeah, it was good. Well, the police station was in the basement, so I remember you could come in and you could kind of duck down your head and see half of the police officers walking around down in the, because the walkway there blocked the full view of the person. But that was in the basement, and then the municipal offices were above that. We should have saved that building, to be frank with you. Well, they built a new city hall up on Deer Hill, tore down this one and put the library here, but I think that building was such a beautiful building that it was a tragedy that we tore it down. But back then it was different, everybody was looking towards sort of this modern approach to architecture, and now everybody's going back to the Victorian period, and we had one of the best buildings in New England here. We would frequently come down to Main Street to go to the Palace Theater and watch a movie. I remember it being a single screen and then going to 2 screens and eventually making 3 screens with the one that they had in the balcony. And you could, walk in pretty much any day, ride your bike down and see a matinee or, see something that was playing at night. And it was happened. There were a lot of people down here. There was Holland's store, which was here, which was a department store on the back side of that by the ice rink, which got a lot of activity and a lot of shopping during the winter months, particularly around Christmas time. And it was a different Main Street. Once the mall opened, a lot of those businesses drained out to the mall and established roots there, or sadly went under because the family businesses just couldn't compete against some of the numbers that the big stores were putting out. But this is a great place to kind of hang around and just pop around with your friends. Kind of, if you can imagine our gang, a little bit like that from the Little Rascals. There was always something going on. Everybody, again, kind of knew each other, but maybe not. And over the years, you couldn't help it but end up getting friendly.
From one of our past participants in this World History Project told me that sometimes during a snow day, they would cancel school, and they would also announce over the radio that this street is actually blocked off for sleigh riding.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would remember?
Oh yeah, there was definitely those kinds of things that happened. Now, I don't remember having as many days off from school as we do now, but I will tell you that we would sleigh ride in the street. So I lived on a very steep hill, and at the top of the hill, and I had friends that lived up there, and we would take our shovels, snow shovels, and we would, after the plow had gone by, we would shovel all the snow back onto the street. And then right in the curb there, where the catch basins are, it was very steep. You would be able to slide all the way down on, whether it was a traditional sled or more a plastic thing that you could jump on, or even one of those aluminum saucers going down. And we would, just have these crazy races, all the way down to the bottom of the hill, and people would drive up past us. It wasn't the smartest thing in the world, but remember, we didn't have the kind of traffic that you have now, so the chance of you getting hit or something like that was really not practical. We also go up to the prison front lawn there, and we spent a lot of summers running around the prison, driving the guards nuts at the time, trying to keep us kids out. And they would once in a while throw something at us, and we'd throw dirt bombs at the pickup trucks going by, and we would sleigh ride down their front. The warden was pretty good about letting us sleigh ride down the front slope there. He or she, whoever, succession of them were there, didn't really have a problem with that. They didn't like us going past the facility to the back where they had access to the lake. They had a very nice compound there, barbecue pit, things like that. That was a little bit far from them, but they would let us use the front lawn for activities like that, and they wouldn't chase us off. I also remember that for a long time, the prisoners who were incarcerated there would be used for community service, labor, painting, things like that. And we had a pump house at the bottom of our street that was that serviced the prison. And prisoners would be out there, and they would be, painting, cleaning, clipping the grass, and taking down the weeds and things like that. And my mother used to make them Kool-Aid, and I would bring down the drinks for them on a hot day and let them drink, or cakes and baked goods and things like that, because she felt bad for them. So I could just kind of remember doing all that stuff, and it was just a fun place. But wintertime, everybody says, oh, the winter times used to be worse here. I think they're really about the same. But there was some times when, the blizzard of '78, this place was shut down for a week. Now today people lose their minds if it was shut down 18 hours. You couldn't drive, you didn't have electricity, there was nowhere to go, and you just waited and kind of waited it out till they got the roads cleared. So I do remember being able to do all those things, and it was just a lot of fun.
Is there anything that you want to share that you may have want to share with us, like maybe something during summer, since we've talked about winter, that you've done with your your friends, a particular fond memory that's related to the Danbury?
Yeah, we had a lot of popular athletic programs. Some of them are still in existence today. Yeah,
baseball was pretty big.
And it didn't matter whether you were good or bad at the sport. Everybody played, because again, there were no video games. There's nothing else to do, so everybody got a chance to play.
Didn't they used to broadcast it?
Oh yeah. It was like
Can you tell me about that?
Well, a lot of the games were broadcast, particularly the American Legion, at Babe Ruth, as you got up a little better. I never made it that high because I was not a good baseball player, but you had to play. You couldn't just not do anything, and there was always a lot of pressure on you to be some part of organized sports. The News Times had a very, very active carrier league that we used to play in, and it was fun. It was something to do. We got little uniforms and whatever, and the paper gave us an opportunity to spend a Saturday afternoon playing baseball. But a lot of the times, while there was emphasis on organized sports, parents didn't necessarily have to be there as much as they do today. They literally could drop you off and pick you up later on. Same thing with the lake. You could go up to the lake and just walk around at the town park, and your parents would say, okay, I'll be back in 3 hours or 2 hours or whatever the time is, or maybe they would come with you. But generally, there wasn't that emphasized. I spent a lot of summers out on the lake, driving in boats, and I remember once we all chipped in to buy a beautiful boat. This one was a little bit older, in my early teens, and spent a lot of money on it through our summer jobs and everything like that. And picked up the boat, took it to the lake. It was a V8 hot rod, beautiful boat, and we forgot to put the drain plug in the back. Actually, the dealer didn't put the drain plug. So we drove it around, had a good time, brought it back to put it back on the trailer, and it started sinking, because water kept falling into it. And we barely got it on the trailer, and flooded the boat out. And then after that, it was always an electrical problem or anything. So it was kind of funny, but we were always doing stuff. We actually used to drive our trucks. Later on, when we had four-wheel drive pickup trucks, we would drive them on the lake. And we cut through the town park and drive them right out on the ice.
Wow.
And you could do that then. I remember walking across the ice all the time to friends' houses, because it was a shortcut from where I lived. to go to a party or something like that at somebody's home. And the summers were the same way. I mean, the lake was kind of the focus of a lot of our recreation. All the sports leagues were as well. Usually you packed in a vacation somewhere there with your parents, maybe camp if you decided to go away to camp. And then the races were every Saturday night, so you had something to do on Saturday night. Even if you didn't like auto racing, people just went just because that's where the people were.
Mhm. Is there anything else that you want to say, or before we end this?
I just want to say this was a really, and it still is. It's just different than it was because we were smaller and there weren't as many people here. But it was just a really cool place to live, work, and be educated in. And I'm very thankful and honored to have been raised here and to have been able to meet so many great people. So many coaches, teachers, everybody that helps formulate you to the adult you are.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Mark.
No problem.
Good to ask him, just sorry before we go. Might be good to ask what he looks forward to in the town, just because this will be a video for like modern day people.
Sure.
It might be like a good
Future people.
Future people. Yeah, right. 3:30.
If
They'll be
that's
watching this.
if that's something that you would like to add, if you have any sort of like insight to what you hope to see, Danbury of the future, so the future people of tomorrow can see today, and maybe you can predict.
Yeah. I mean, I think Danbury is uniquely positioned in the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut has gone through a series of difficult, challenging economic times. But when you look at Danbury and this 44 square miles, and whether it's job growth, business creation, business expansion, whether it's our schools or whether it's the status of our parks and things like that, all those things are continuing to evolve, but in a very positive way. And I'm excited about that because I think Danbury really in this next decade will be our opportunity to shine in terms of being that place where it's on the cutting edge of new technologies, where it embraces this new group of young people that view the world a little bit differently, but have these really creative and neat and innovative ideas about things to be done. And so we want to facilitate that and be partners in that. And I think our Main Street is just poised for economic growth. We have a very large market rate housing project that's getting settled up here. We've got some other announcements coming up next couple weeks of this month that we think will be beneficial to the Main Street corridor. Businesses are starting to open here again, and it's good to see, and all that's organic. We're seeding it a little bit, but a lot of it's organic. So I'm just excited about the next 10 years in this city, and I'm just really excited about that this is the community that people want to live to. People vote with their feet. If they don't like an area and they don't want to live there, they leave. Well, the opposite is true here. People are coming here every year to start a family, to begin building and working on the American dream.